Hey you guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, Peterisms, where I tell stories of my life and just little things that I have learned as I've grown into the person that I am today. And I was just sitting here, I just finished my Peter Does Stuff video, and I was like rolling through I feel like I'm kind of like off center. I always am when I'm sitting on the bed. But anyway, I was rolling through the comments, and I was looking through the different comments to try to figure out something to talk about over here. Like I said, if you guys leave questions or comments in the comment sections, unless they're like super personal, then I will make a video about it and address it. And if you don't feel comfortable doing that, email me, send me a DM or something like that. A couple people have done that already. So I saw this comment, and I thought this comment was like and there's two people that commented back to it. I haven't read the comments, so I thought we would read them on here, and I just want to kind of address this because I think this is an interesting topic for discussion. So somebody said, I'm going through my sober journey, and lately it's been really difficult for me to deal with the shame and embarrassment about the things I did when I wasn't sober. So the shame and embarrassment, being sober now, the shame and embarrassment of the things that you did when you were using. Is there any references or advice you or anyone can give on how to overcome it without resorting to harmful ways to switch it off? And then somebody said, guilt, shame, and remorse is part of, and I'm assuming she means by like going back and you use over those things. Okay, so guilt, shame, and remorse. Somebody's response says, guilt, shame, and remorse is part of my using days. I've worked the 12 steps with a sponsor to clear away the wreckage of my past to the best of my ability. Today, I use those horrible things I did when working with others to let them know that I did those same things too. Very good. That was my old behavior. Today, I'm able to hold my head high because I am not that person anymore. Hope this helps. And then another person says, when I say I still struggle with it, I mean it's normal to feel some guilt about the past. Absolutely. The feeling you will never make amends for things you did will not always plague you because you truly will make amends. You will stay sober and show the people in your life and yourself that you have changed, grown, and healed. And I'm assuming that these people are people that are working a 12-step program, so I'm just going to take it from that point of view because there's a lot of people that get sober other different ways. I respect all of that. The thing for me, and the reason why I continue to work a 12-step program today is, and I know there's a lot of people that it's not their thing. Hey, like I said, I totally respect that. I had tried a lot of different things by the time that I had gotten sober, and none of them really worked for me. I think why a 12-step program ultimately ended up working for me was because, A, it was very structured in what I was supposed to be doing. You know, I had a sponsor. The sponsor told me to do these things. I'd go to meetings. I got a lot out of the meetings. I mean, when I left meetings in early sobriety, and I still get this feeling every once in a while, I felt like what other people must feel like when they leave church. I felt like I had some kind of soul or spirit had like blown through me. Honest to God, that's how I felt in early sobriety. I just felt like alive again, you know? And I felt a lot of hope. And then over the course of time, in that first year, you know, like, I just felt like a lot of serenity and peace. I didn't have people telling me things about this or that, but that could come with any other way to get sober. Ultimately, what happened was when I started doing inventory, my first inventory was not great, you know? When I started doing inventory, and I started making amends, and what I realized was that I wasn't, like, doing the things that I had done before and whatever. I wasn't, you know, like, hurting people with my words and things like that and being selfish and self-centered, and I was like changing as a person because of the work that I was doing in a 12-step program. What I realized was that a lot of the root reasons why I used were rooted in things that I was working on in inventory with my sponsor, sharing in meetings, things like that. And then those things that I couldn't work on there were things I was taking to my therapist and then later took to my therapist. I think this whole idea of guilt and shame is very interesting. I have to say, today, and I'm just going to be 100% honest in this video, obviously I always am, but about things, because I think this is something we don't talk a lot about in sobriety. I think a lot of people think that you get sober and then you get well because, you know, getting sober, addicts and alcoholics are sick people trying to get well. They're not bad people trying to get good. I think that's the twist in our heads sometimes, right? Is that we consider ourselves bad people. Because when we were using, we would hear a lot of people say to us, like family and friends, if you loved me, you wouldn't do these things. Well, I think we know now that if love were enough, there wouldn't be need, I've said this before, for counselors, treatment programs, 12-step programs, MAT programs, things like that, right? Like we wouldn't need that if love was enough. And so, you know, as you get, you know, some time in sobriety, what you realize is that I wasn't a bad person. I was a sick person that did bad things to help my sickness, if that makes sense. And so you kind of like forgive yourself over time, especially when people start forgiving you. And through your actions, you see that you're changing and whatever, right? But like, this is something that comes up from time to time in my meetings and, you know, and stuff like that. But there are things that, I mean, we're human beings, right? And so there are things that people do, that this is the reason for a 10th step. And a 10th step is daily inventory. There are things that you're going to continue to do. It's not like you get sober and you make these changes and then you're a perfect human being, right? We're forever works in progress. So you're never going to be a perfect example of that. And at times you're going to do things that are glimpses of that person that you were in your past, right? And so I think that's what's difficult at times, because in your head, you know, it's like I was having this conversation with my sponsor about a year ago. Like, one of my goals was that I just was like, I just really want, and every time I say this, people throw out my drama channel, and I just want to say, that channel is like if you had a sober person working for, like, you know, The View or whatever, okay? It's a very gossipy channel and things like that. And in all honesty, that has been a hard channel for me to continue and rectify as I've worked harder in a 12-step program. But I see that as a job that I do on that channel, and that's, you know, what I do. And I feel like I give suggestive advice to people. I share personal experiences in my life and things like that. And that's not a justification. I know that there's people out there that don't like what I have to say. But in my mind, I can make that right. Okay, so, you know, but there are things that in my personal life that I have done in the 29 years that I've been sober that I'm not proud of. There were 4 years that I was not going to meetings. I wasn't working a 12-step program. The only thing I was doing was not using. But for the grace of God, I didn't pick up. I don't know how. My friend Tanya would say to me the whole time, she would say, I don't know how you're going out all the time and you're going to bars and you're doing this and you're not drinking. I go, I don't know, Tanya. Like, I'm not craving it. I don't think about it or whatever, right? And so that's why I say but for the grace of God, because but for the grace of God, there go I, you know, that I could have picked up and used anytime during then. What's so crazy to me now is, as hard as I'm working in sobriety, I look back at those 4 years and I was miserable. I was angry. I was pissed off at the world. I was pissed off at my husband. I was mad. I was angry. I had no emotional sobriety. I had no spiritual foundation. I had no peace and serenity. I said nasty things, you know, I acted out in nasty ways. I was not a nice person. And I was sober, right? And that's where I feel like the 12-step piece comes in, or counseling or whatever. Because once you remove the drink or the drug, you still have to work on who you are internally, right? Because the drink or the drug was working for us in some ways. It was muting things. It was helping us deal with different issues and things like that. At least for me. I can only share my experience, strength, and hope. So when I took the alcohol and the drug away, it was like left this empty space inside of me of like, who are you then as a person? Like, this is why I continue, when people ask me, why do you continue to go to meetings and things like that? Because the people that I see today that have 30, 40, 50 years of sobriety and are peaceful and serene and happy relationships, doing good deeds, those are the people that have what I want. And so I do what they do. But I can tell you what didn't work for me was when I stepped away from the 12-step program and I stepped away from my belief system of a higher power, and I was not a nice person. I was, excuse me for that. I was not a nice person. I was not. I was putting things out there into the world that were not kind. And I just was, you know, speaking to people in my personal life in not very nice ways. I was isolating a lot. I just was really angry at everything. That was at the point that our marriage was not doing very, very well. And I just was really unhappy in life, you know? And I kind of also felt like, this was after my mom passed away, and I kind of was also like, okay, God, like, I've done all this work, you know, you took my mom away from me. And I've said this before in videos, like, it was a very irrational anger. I didn't really have anybody to be mad at by my mom passing. It was nobody's fault, you know. She got sick and she passed away. And so the only sense I could make of it was to be pissed off at God. And that's really what I did with it. And then I stepped away from a 12-step program, and I just was like, okay, you know what? Screw this. Like, I have done this work. I've worked hard to improve myself. I've done this. I've done that. Like, and this is what I'm handed. You know, and I've had several moments like that, you know. I think you guys know about the accident a couple years ago. It was very important for me during that time to stay in the middle of sobriety and talk to all of my support system, my sponsor, my therapist that I got that year, things like that, and stay in the middle of it, because I did not want to go back to this idea of, which I did have this in my head, okay, God, I have worked for 20 some years at being a good person, and then this happens, right? And I don't have any control over it because it's a medical emergency. Like, there was a lot of whys going on here, okay? And so I couldn't make sense of it in my head. But I also knew that a drink or a drug was not going to fix the situation. It wasn't going to take away everything. It would work temporarily. You know, it would make me feel a little bit better for a night, but then I'd wake up and the same problems would exist. The same situations would have existed. And so, you know, it's hard, you know? And so what you realize is a drink or drug's not going to fix these things, period, end of story, you know? The guilt or shame from the things that we did when we were drinking or using, it gradually goes away over time, okay? You know, there's a saying that we say, it works if you work it. It's like a slogan in recovery. And it works if you work it. It really does. I don't know how. I don't know why. I have no idea, okay? I have friends of mine that are agnostic in recovery that do not believe in a higher power. I think that's difficult, but it works for them. I have friends of mine that don't go to a lot of meetings. I have friends of mine that, you know, had a sponsor for a while and don't and are looking. I have friends of mine that have sponsors, go to 7 meetings a week, and, you know, are very active in recovery. I have friends of mine all across the board that do different things and are all in a 12-step program, right? But the one thing that they all have together, if they're working some semblance of a program, is that they have peace and serenity in their lives. And they don't stay stuck in guilt of things that they did when they were using, right? I say in here often that this is not a program of shame or blame, because it's not, right? And that keeps us stuck, and I'm just speaking from my experience, strength, and hope. That keeps us stuck in the past. Now, I think it's important to remember the things that we did, you know? It's like we say, you know, we don't forget it, nor do we close the door on it. It's not, okay, it's important not to stay stuck in it, but it's also important to not forget it. Like, I don't have to relive it every day of my life, but I also think it's important to never forget where I was, right? Because then when I want to go to the bottle, or I want to go to the pill, or I want to go to this, or I want to go to that, right? It's a real easy fast track there. You know, and I would love to sit there and tell you that in 29 years, I've never had, you know, cravings. I've never thought, I mean, I don't really that much anymore, but I also think that that speaks to the volume of the recovery that I'm doing today. You know, like my sponsor always says to me, how sober do you want to be? Because the more work you do, the more you put into it, the more sober you're going to be. And that's not just sobriety, that's anything, right? Like anything you do in life, the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. Well, there's been a lot of times in my sobriety that I haven't really been doing a lot. You know, that I was lazy, that I was complacent. I wasn't doing anything for my sobriety. Therefore, I wasn't getting anything out of it. And the people around me suffered, and I suffered, and I was just not a nice person, you know? And I don't want to be that person today. You know, and in therapy and inventory, I can go back to those years, and I can look at what, like, the 4 years I didn't go to meetings, and the time when I was using, and I can say, okay, this is why I was that person, you know? That it was because of this, it was because of that. Like, I was angry. I can make it a million excuses, but the reality is it comes all back to me. There was nothing right about those things, right? Like, I'm responsible fully for that. For when I was using and how I hurt people, you know? And later, in the 4 years that I wasn't, and how I talked to people and how I interacted with people and things like that, right? Like, I look at that, and it's not even cringy. It's like, I understand what you're saying with the embarrassment of the shame, but the thing is that I have to remember is, I don't want to be that person today, and I have the ability to change and grow. But it's important for me to look at who I was then and realize why I was doing those things. And what do I have to do so I'm not that person today? What do I have to do to continue? And that, for me, is continuing with therapy, okay, on a regular basis, continuing with marriage counseling, having a sponsor that I'm actively working with, continuing to do inventory, continuing to go to meetings, having a support system and a 12-step program around me. Prayer and meditation is extremely important to me today in a way that it never was for the majority of my sobriety. You know, my connection and my relationship with my higher power is vital to me today. You know, peace and serenity are not luxuries. I used to live in sobriety. I lived in a lot of chaos, okay? And if you look at those periods of my time, you can see that I was living in chaos. You know, it's just very easy to see that at that time, I was not a happy person, okay? I was a person living in chaos that was very angry and not happy. I can take responsibility for that, but the responsibility also goes into what am I doing today to not be that person? Am I putting out positivity into the world, or am I continuing to be that same person I was today? But for me to continue to relive things I did when I was 19, 20, 21, what's the point? I can't go back and change that, you know? One of my old sponsors that's since passed away said to me, right, like, 5 seconds after something happens, it's in the past. You can't change that, okay? But what you can do is you can learn from that. You can learn about, like, who do I want to be today, right? Like, it's very much a don't cry over spilled milk kind of thing. Who do I want to be today? What can I be? I can be more careful with the glass of milk on the table. You know, I can be, you know, whatever, watch what I'm doing, things like that. That's just an example as an analogy, right? But as a person in recovery, if I don't want to repeat who I was in the past, what do I have to do today to not do that? And that doesn't just go for recovery. That goes for all of us in the real world, right? Like, if you were nasty in a past relationship, you know, maybe you don't want to be that person today. And so you're going to change this and you're going to be somebody different today, you know, and things like that. You know, I was talking to somebody the other day and they were talking about that, like, they witnessed their mother speaking poorly to their dad their entire life. And then when they got married, they, like, immediately started talking the way that their husband, and this is not a person that's sober, they immediately started talking to their husband the way that their mother had talked to their father, because that was how they were trained, you know, like, growing up seeing that. Okay, that's fine. That makes sense. That is an explanation, but it's not an excuse. Okay, a lot of these things I'm saying today are explanations, but they're not excuses. You know, there really are never any good excuses except for I'm changing, this is what I'm doing to change. I don't have any issue getting on video, sharing with people in my life the things that I'm doing today, the lengths that I'm going to be a changed person. I'm not perfect by any means, right? I'm continuing to work on these things every day. And that's the only thing you can ask of yourself. You know, so when I was talking to her, I said, well, what did you do? And she goes, like, I mean, after 6 months of us being married and my husband being like, you know, we were talking about therapy. And she said, and my husband being like, you know, like, you talk to me like your mom talks to your dad and I can't handle it. She was like, I was so afraid I was going to lose my marriage. I immediately got into therapy and I, unpacked that stuff and worked through it and whatever. And I was like, wow, like, that's powerful, right? To realize it. So if you're ate up with those things that are bothering you from your past, you know, talk to whoever you have in your life as a support system on what do I do today to be different from who I was then. So that then you are constantly even if you have to journal it down or whatever, that you actively know what I'm doing today, you know. We're never going to be perfect examples of ourselves. But if I can say to you today, these are the things I'm doing so I don't repeat those things of the past, sure, I'm going to make mistakes from time to time. I forgive myself a lot quicker today, and I hope that other people can too, right? You know, but I think the thing is to, there was a saying at the end, if you ever watched the show The Alienist, they were on the second season, and it was a book by Caleb Carr, but in the second season, Dakota Fanning plays the part of the female detective, and she's fantastic in it. And at the end of it, she said something like, I hope through the changes I've made, I used to have it in my phone, but she said something to the sentiment of, I hope that through my changes that I have shown that those are evidence of who I am today. And that evidence is not constantly compared to who I was 20 years ago and the mistakes that I made, right? Like, I think it's a fair comparison if you haven't changed today and you're putting out there into the world and the people around you the same things you did 10 or 20 years ago. But if you've shown by example that you are not that person today, I don't know that I think it's fair to be thrown that up in your face from 20 years ago, you know? I just don't. And like, using my drama channel as an example, I'm very careful today. I might not have been a couple years ago, but today I'm very careful of when I notice change and growth in people, trying to acknowledge that to my best ability. It's not something that happens overnight. You know, it's something that you have to show over time. To the people in my personal life, I've had to show over a great amount of time how much I've changed, you know? My dad and my stepmom the most. I mean, years of showing them that I changed, right? So I don't think that that's going to happen overnight with people. But to acknowledge that, right? If somebody is making an effort and saying, I'm going to therapy, I'm doing this, I'm trying to do better, I'm trying to do this, right? Like, I don't know that I also feel like it's kind of like salt in the wound a little bit to continue to throw those things up in that person's face, right? Okay, but then if they're doing the same things that they're doing then, that's when you have a conversation with them and you go, hey, like, I want to acknowledge that you're changing and growing too, but in all honesty, like, you're doing the same things you were doing 20 years ago, right? Like, and I'm still hurt the same way that I was hurt 20 years ago. Like, I think that's a fair conversation. So maybe ask some of the people in your life, you know, I cannot get rid of this guilt, the shame, and the embarrassment of the things I'm doing today. Do you feel like I'm the same person that I was then? If you are honestly changing and growing, the people in your life will tell you, no, you're not that same person today. I can tell you that. And maybe you need to hear that, you know? Maybe you need to hear that. I can tell you this, that I have never grown from guilt. You know, I think guilt has pushed me in the right direction. I think guilt has made me question a lot of things that I've done in my past or who I am as a person. But guilt has never made me be a better person. Guilt has kept me stuck a lot. It has made me question things, and it has made me think, okay, this is a different perspective I need to look at. But when I have any questions about who I am in this world, I ask my husband. You know, my friend Tanya always says, if you want to know who I am, ask my husband, ask my kid, ask my employees, right? Same thing with me. You want to know who I am? Don't ask somebody on YouTube that doesn't know me, you know? No offense, but ask my husband, ask my mother-in-law, ask my cousin Caroline, ask my best friend, ask my sponsor. They'll tell you who I am. Those are the people that know me the best. Ask the people in your life that know you. They'll tell you the truth. And if you're not changing and growing, they'll be honest with you. You know, but be open to what they say, because you might not want to hear what they have to say. Or you might, because they might say, why are you beating yourself up so bad for things you did in the past that you can't change? I think the other thing I would say to any addict or alcoholic out there, okay, that is reliving things from the past, be very, very careful, because you also hinted at this in your comment. Be very, very careful, because I think in early sobriety, I was wanting to use those things as excuses that I can never change. Nothing's going to ever change in my life. I can't take those things away. What's the point? And what I didn't realize was that was my head. That was the addiction working overtime to push me in the direction to use, okay? I can remember when I got sober and my counselor in aftercare said to me, every day that you get sober, okay, the sober alcoholic and addict is on your shoulder saying to you, you can do this, you got this, you can do this. But the devil on your other side, the devil addict and alcoholic is in here saying, you can just use once. It'll take away this pain. It'll take away the guilt. It'll take away the shame and the embarrassment. You'll feel better. And you can just do it for a little while, right? And it was those two competing things. Both of them are very, very strong. But you got this. You got this. Just put one foot in front of the other, you know? And I think that's why it's so important that slogans like just for today, you know, minute by minute, things like that are so important, right? Because I can't think long term. I just can't. I have to think some days, hour by hour, minute by minute, second by second. But today I just have a daily reprieve, you know? And if I put my head on the bed tonight and I haven't picked up, then I'm doing okay. And I got to remember that, you know? There's a lot of things I have to work on, but if I just don't pick up for today, I'm doing a hell of a lot better than I was doing 29 years ago. And I got to remember that. And so do you. So best of luck to you. This was a fantastic question that you asked. I think it's a question that we can apply in and out of recovery to everybody. So thank you so much for asking it. I love you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.